having more down days than ever before, totally unable to feel good, totally dysregulated all the time, feeling like junk. Well, this is the video for you because we're going to discover astrological meaning in our lives that can help us understand why we aren't feeling whole and at peace within ourselves. It's about being whole, which is about being balanced, which is about not letting external things set us off all the time. In astrology, North and South Node is the key, in my opinion, to understanding a lot of our dysregulated, unbalanced states that are keeping us from feeling at peace, what we really want. So let's get into understanding astrology and how it can help our life. So welcome back to Zen Penguin. On this channel, we look at things through logical, practical application. And today we're going to look at astrology and how you might not have ever heard it before, just from my own musings. Don't think of it as I have to be professional and present it in the perfect way, because to me, it's just about presenting it in a way that can actually change your life. Because let's keep it real, the whole reason we study astrology or social sciences, psychology, any of that stuff is self-help, self-improvement, self-awareness, getting there, right? And so today we're going to look at the North and South Node. And so I want to just say it in a nutshell real quick and then kind of break it down a little better and then get to the end part where you understand how to apply this understanding to your everyday life and start to feel better and whole within yourself. And so we'll start by saying the North and South Node are points in your chart that are mathematically calculated based on the sun and moon, and the sun being our external expression and the moon being our internal world. So internal world and our external world, and these calculations are kind of like a middle point of where we are meant to balance. And so when we become out of balance, we have a South Node that tells us where we mastered something that kept us out of balance with the North Node. And so if we could get more North Node, then we would be able to unlock more of the highest potential of the South Node and become in balance and be whole. Okay, I know that was a mouthful, so we're going to unpack that. Okay, so South Node, we're going to start there because that is what we're comfortable doing. That is what we can just do, whether it's good or bad. And we all know that. It's like, why the freak did I do that? It's like, because that's what we're used to doing. That's how we're used to resolving problems. That's how we're used to going about our day. That's the way we're used to thinking and acting and being. It's just so natural to just do this. It's like breathing, right? And so let's just use that example. We are unconscious to breathing. It's just normal. We don't have to sit there and think, oh, you better take that in breath, push it out. You know, that would be conscious of it, but unconsciously we're just doing it all day. And that's what breathing is about, being unconscious, so we don't have to waste any of our conscious mind on the action. Okay. And so the South Node is very similar. We've become unconscious to it. It's just our most inherent things are unconscious. Okay. We learn to walk, crawl, eat, swallow, blink. These are all inherent natural things that we do unconsciously. And so we can look at our South Node as that. This is just what I'd like to call normal to us. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's the best thing, but this is what is normal, and this is the way that we come into this lifetime. If we were able to study genetics would point to our South Node as an example. Genetically, this is what we're predisposed to do, okay? And so what happens, though, is we came into this life to achieve more balance because we got too comfortable doing it this way. So just picture an older person that had passed on, and you notice that they handled things in a very rigid way, and you're like, oh, I wish I could just explain to them, but they just won't budge into doing something a better way. So then in their next life, they would still present this way. And the reason I believe in past life is not any woo-woo thing I studied. It was having 6 kids and their personalities and who they were and how strong and dominant that was and how different that was across the landscape. I realized this is coming from somewhere else, and I could tell you stories. Man. So I do believe that we have concurrent lives, as some call it, or other lives, or other timelines, or past lives, or whatever you want to call it. We are a soul. And in this body, in this incarnation, we are still that same soul that has lived millions of years. And so the South Node is pointing to how we usually do things, okay? And what we're comfortable doing, even if it's mucking up our life, which it is, because we're out of balance with the opposite polarity. The whole chart is about opposites. Each sign is opposing each other to create balance when you get into and the center on an astrology wheel is Earth, or aka you, in your manifested state. And then it out, and then you can see where your consciousness, where your psyche is by the map of astrology. And so your South Node is super important, and we're going to focus on that today because I have good news for you. You don't really need to know your birth time to figure out your North and South Node. Unless they're right on a cusp, you might want to check, but we're going to just go with you don't need it, because that's a big hang up for people, is trying to get their birth time. A lot of people don't know it. So North and South Node is a great place to start in astrology, because you can look it up without your birth time. Just put in noon or the default, whatever that is, and let it roll out and figure out where your North and South Node is. It's not going to tell you houses, but we're not going to deal with houses. It's going to tell you your signs so you can understand, and that we'll get into. So let's go back into, so now your South Node is what you're comfortable, and let's just use the example of you sabotage your life doing it this way. No change. And so the way to get to change is to understand your North Node, okay? So if you just did this one thing in astrology and looking at your chart, you would exponentially be able to change your life. So the North Node, just for understanding, is usually what you attract in other people that triggers you, that you don't like, that you judge, because you're comfortable doing it this way, and the opposite polarity, and is usually the people you attract are doing it this way. And why would you keep attracting that? So that you could embody some of what they have. But instead we push it away and judge it because it's something we repress in ourselves. Because we have everything in this chart in ourselves. We've just chosen to put all our energy into this direction. And so the other direction, we need more of that. And so we attract those people, and what we don't like or what we repress in ourselves, we judge. Okay? So that's one way to look at it. But then the other way to look at it is if there was no other people around us and we were just like, how do I balance this North Node? It would be what we long for, what we desire. Because what we embody, we don't long for. Like if we embody abundance, we wouldn't long for money. If we embodied nourished fulfillment, we wouldn't seek food. If we embodied, love, we wouldn't seek it outside of ourselves. So it's kind of like a codependent thing. It's like, I really need this other thing, right? Because we're not embodying it in ourselves. I hope that makes sense, because it's the best way I can describe. People talk about we chase our North Node. And I don't really like that, because there's a lot of, polarization to our North Node, where in the reality, we kind of reject it. All the people with qualities like that. And that's why a lot of our relationships are going to be, as Paula Abdul said, and I'm aging myself here, opposites attract, right? Opposites attract, but we also drive each other bananas. Why? Because then if we could learn to accept the parts that we don't like in another, it's because we're cultivating that in ourselves. Because love thy neighbor as thyself, and what I believe that is what we have in ourselves we can extend to our neighbors. So if I have grace for myself, then I'm repressing the parts that I don't like. I'll be able to have grace for the other person when they're doing that. So let me just make a quick example here. For me, I'm a very mature person. I have been since I was a child. I lacked that ability to be immature and playful and just whatever, and just let's play Barbies and do all of the fun things, and let's watch wrestling on TV and pretend we're wrestlers. I really lacked that. I came in as a very mature individual, and I would attract people that were very immature. Very immature, bananas immature. And of course, I was judging that because I was repressing that part of myself. And so I would attract it to try to say to myself, I can be more like that and have grace for myself, but my maturity wouldn't let me. So that would be a very Cancer, Capricorn, or what else? Maybe even Gemini, Sag. Gemini tends to be more playful and immature. Aries tends to be more immature and Libra tends to be more mature. So there I have my ascendant descendant. I'm just making examples of how all of these polarities kind of play off each other so you can understand when you look at your south node and north node where your imbalance is through this example. And so as I started to be more playful and immature, it didn't bother me that other people were immature because I could love my neighbor as I was loving myself, because you can't give people what you don't have for yourself. And so when you can't give somebody grace for their immaturity, it means you don't like immaturity in yourself, right? So you got to fill your own cup there. And so what we do with the North Node is we long for that. I long to have a life that's less strict. Not really putting together. The people that are coming into your life are showing you what you're asking for, but you're judging it because you repressed and judged that part of yourself because you had to, for me, grow up way too fast because of my environment. So I didn't have time for that kind of nonsense. So let's get into more examples of North and South nodes so you can really understand and apply it to your life in a logical, practical way. Okay, so I just want to start here by saying that mastering your south node and relying on it is a detriment because you're moving your energy and focus into an imbalance. And so the next way I'd like to describe that to you is that person that you notice is way too incapable of leaving their comfort zone. Okay. So they could have like south node in the 4th house or 3rd house, something where it's like, I just want to stay in my little bubble and not branch out. And then so 3rd house was where your south node is, which is about your immediate environment, and you got comfortable there and you didn't want to expand. The house that and the sign that kind of opposes that, so that sign is Gemini, and that's Mercury. That's our lower mind, our immediate environment, our early education, our, you know, if you don't want to leave that, the polar opposite sign of that is Sagittarius, which is extremely expansive. It's like learning every foreign culture, traveling to foreign nations, things like that. So you can see every sign does that. And so if you're too rigid in your south node in that example, you would be judgmental of other cultures. You would maybe even have some racism going on there and not realizing that's really affecting your life because you're not, you know, free your mind and the rest will follow type thing. And think about what I'm talking about here. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. That is the mind, and that can be a limited mind state, right? Because Jupiter is an expanded mind state. So what you would do in that scenario is just kind of say, okay, I need to start accepting in myself that I'm afraid to travel instead of judging things from other cultures, because we're just doing what we are repressing in a projected judgment way, even though inside of ourselves, we're probably longing for a better life experience. We're sick of the mundane, you know, we don't even see that we're sabotaging ourselves. And a south node in that capacity would be, you know, understood as this is why I'm comfortable. I've been doing this for multiple lifetimes. This is in my genetics. This is not going to budge, but it won't budge in trying to force yourself to go move to another country and accept other cultures. It's more about, and this is the key, so let's get to the tips and tricks. It's more about embracing in ourselves that we are afraid or we are used to this and we don't understand that. It's really just bringing self-awareness all the time. There's one thing I could convey to you when you learn astrology or you start to understand yourself deeper, and that's what your astrology chart will show you, yourself at a deep level. And it's so eye-opening and helpful that I wish everybody could get on this gravy train, right? But when you start to understand yourself, it's not that you want to do an external thing to change it. It's more about just bringing awareness to the repressed parts of yourself. Your North Node is a repressed part of yourself that you don't accept, you don't like, you don't understand because you got too comfortable in the opposite polarity, okay? Your mind just defaults to this. It doesn't understand that. So the number one tip and trick is how I talk on this channel in every capacity is just to bring self-awareness in it and accept it, because then when we start accepting this is the reason why, then you're bringing yourself grace, like this is just what I've believed for a long time. And then when you find somebody that's an opposite culture that you used to clash with, then you'll have so much more grace, because you'll understand it's not them that I'm upset about and their beliefs and their culture. It's really that I am not accepting of myself in that capacity. So let me say that another way. I am so afraid of change that I judge people that are trying to force me to change. And if I could just understand that we're all sovereign, which just means we can all believe and act and have a culture all our own, and nobody has to judge it, nothing's going to change you or hurt you, that would really help you learn to accept other cultures. And then before you know it, you're traveling the world. So it's the internal change in your psyche. The natal chart is understanding your psyche, how you're ticking inside. And if you shift that, the external becomes easy. Unfortunately, in this reality, we always try to beat the freaking drum of the outside. We're beating the screen of reality instead of changing the projector, right? And so that's trick number one, is just to accept that you're afraid, or that you have resistance because it's been uncomfortable, or maybe you had a trauma with another culture, a clash, something of that nature that's stuck in your genetics. Ancestrally, we have a lot of stuff in there. And so for us, it's just that inner alchemy, that neutralization and that awareness, and so that we can move more into balance of this broader thing. And then once we do that, we'll start to notice our relationships improve, because if we really think about it, our culture, especially when it comes to third house, is very little and limited. It's, it could be just our block, our neighborhood, our school friends and things. And some people live in that environment their whole lives. And so of course they're afraid of things they don't know or understand. But that's the key there, is just to say, I'm afraid of what I don't understand. It's a repressed part of myself. That fear is repressing my ability to move out of that paradigm. Okay, so I'll make another example so we can understand this even deeper, and then another tip to help you overcome the resistance of moving into your north node, because I'm here to tell you that's the key to wholeness. It really is. Because in that example, as I was sharing with you, that will keep you stuck and then wishing for a better dream life. And the key is this north and south node stuff, honestly. Because once you're whole, you don't have those resistance or those self-sabotage or those rejections to the reality that keep you from moving forward, period. So let's get to another example. Okay, so the next thing I want to use is South Node in Cancer, North Node in Capricorn. And so this is near and dear to my heart, because this is where my North and South Node are. And I can tell you with deep vulnerability and honesty what that looked like for me. And so I have Cancer South Node. So what that looked like for me, and I'm not even going to describe the houses, because the houses make it more sensible to understand, but we'll just use it without houses, because we're going to really just look at our chart as far as signs. And so Cancer is about emotions and how you use your emotions, your frequency to live. And a lot of it is ancestral patterning. It's things that we embody from our mother, which just means our ancestry, because our mother got it from her mother and her mother and her mother. And what did those ladies do? They attracted the same man. And so it's really your mother and your father, but you really embody it from the mother. Cancer is the sign of the mother, but it's also the sign of our emotion and our habitual energy patterns. And that's important, because to describe to you my South Node in Cancer, I'll just say I had habitual emotional patterns that I was using and very comfortable using to stay safe and in control of my reality, right? So remember, our South Node is going to make us feel like we're staying safe and in control, but a lot of times they're just self-sabotage, as this example will show. So the first part of my life, I started in sales when I was 13 years old. And by the time I hit 40, I was CEO. How did I get there? And I had left high school. So how did I get there? Because I was used to being able to use emotions to manipulate people to get what I wanted. South Node Cancer. Okay. But I didn't really realize until I got to that 40-year-old place where I was like, wow, I've used my, I didn't say this consciously, by the way, but I used my emotions to manipulate to get here all the way to the top, and I'm still super unhappy. Because why? Because I was still in that emotional pattern. I needed something drop out to the bottom bad to happen to manipulate people in from my sadness and my victimhood to give me what I wanted. And so I was still in that emotional pattern, which feels like shit, period. Capricorn's emotionalist. It structures, it just gets to the top by climbing that mountain. I was so desperately wanting more Capricorn in my life. Didn't realize it until I really studied astrology, and then I started to realize I reject all Capricorn people, and the things that I would say about them was ridiculous. But now I'm using this to help you understand what I was saying before. We judge it because we repress that part of ourselves. And so what I was judging is people are, because I didn't go to high school, and I had achieved such amazing amounts of money, let's just say it. In a life of I moved to a big fancy city, a big fancy house, I had all the things. And then I judged the people that were back home that did it the ABC. I'll go to college and do this, and they're working hard, and one day we'll buy a house. I'd already bought 3 houses on a whim. And it was just like I judged that in other people, all the Capricorn traits, like, oh, that's just stupid. And it's so bad. Like, even when I would go into boardrooms, I'd wear hoodies and I would judge the people in business suits. I was no Capricorn. I could do whatever I want because I could manipulate people's emotions and talk the good talk and this and that, but no structure in my life whatsoever. None. Period. This is the Capricorn North Node part that I had to move into. So what starts to happen is your soul is like, okay, you're hitting rock bottom on this. Rock bottom is a solid foundation in which we rebuild our lives, right? In all capacities of South Node, there will be a point where you're just like, I'm sick of this. And that's why I'm making this video, because then you can use this trick number 2. I'm sick of this. How do I change it? How do I start embracing my North Node? And trust me, we long for it. We desire it. We project it out. And then we attract it and we reject it. This is that push and pull thing energetically. So I was attracting a lot of people with strong Capricorn tendencies, and I was maybe idolizing them to the point that I would reject them because it was repressed in myself. It's all projection, right? So what we repress, we project. So what was starting to happen towards the end of that is that I was like realizing that the reason I was feeling low, and this was the biggest epiphany for me, is because I would have to feel low so that I could manipulate somebody. Let me make an example of that. After my divorce, I had a man, and he wasn't running that dynamic with me. And just so you know, my divorce was Uranus opposed Uranus at 42. That really wakes us up. Uranus is the great awakener. And I'm not kidding you. I could tell you so many stories about awakening through Uranus. It's bananas. So when that was happening, it wasn't allowing me to run that dynamic. So I had a new man. I was trying to run the same dynamic. And guess what? He didn't care. He didn't give 2 shits about my emotional manipulation. He didn't care. And so then I just had to keep feeling down. I wasn't getting that escalated feeling from manipulating them and getting what I wanted. I was just stuck at the bottom. Rock bottom. Key. So I did what every other, good citizen would do. I called him a narcissist. The empath versus the narcissist. The greatest story ever told, right? And so, no, he was my greatest blessing, because he wasn't giving me my way. So then I just had to sit with that ick feeling. And then I realized the number one thing, I had to start structuring my life to feel good for myself, not for manipulation. Meaning I just had to accept that other people weren't at my mercy and my beck and call, playing out my story of, oh, I'm a damsel in distress, I need your help. And then they do it. And a lot of that stuff I learned through sales, but did I really learn it through sales, or was sales just a traction point for my energy patterns? Yeah. So that second tip is, when you finally reach rock bottom, look at your South Node and then start to embrace the qualities of your North Node. So for me, as the example, I had to start becoming more Capricorn. Capricorn builds all by itself. it is determined to climb up that mountain, and it will do it step by step by step without anybody. No emotion. So we don't want to be that. We want to balance the two, right? How do we balance the two? Good emotions, and then we have others help us build a sense of, community, and not manipulation, not codependency, not all those things. That's what whole spirits do, right? But all of the imbalance of the chart will bring us into codependency because we're seeking the other thing, right? And so through my Cancer emotional manipulation, I was attracting people that could build it for me all the time. I had maids for my houses. I had landscapers for my yard. I had my husband as a stay-at-home dad, and he did all the work in the house with the kids. And I just made the money and manipulated people to get what I wanted. So it's been a very tough road to implement that Capricorn in my life, because I embodied this ancestrally, genetically, throughout time. No inner structure, no external structure, even in my home. Cleaning the house felt like shit to my nervous system. Cooking, all of it. I had to rebuild from the inside out. So, Capricorn was a very hard lesson for me, but once I started to do that, it was amazing, because then all the Cancer goodness was starting to happen. I started to feel good because I didn't have to drop to the lower forms of emotional manipulation of Cancer to get what I wanted. I was building what I wanted, and it felt good. I was getting into balance, and I was becoming whole. So let's get into the final, understanding of the tips and tricks of how we get to this balance, and what I would, implore you to do to try to, use some of what I've shared with you in your own chart, your own life. First thing you should do is really analyze, once you understand your sign placement of the South Node, understand, you can even just Google or use like AI to understand the archetype of the sign ruling. So for me, I would understand Cancer. What are the toxic traits of Cancer? What are the amazing traits of Cancer? What is the full scale of Cancer, from the lowest dimension to the highest, and really understand everything you can about that South Node. You have mastered that at every octave of the scale of Cancer energy, from the pits of hell to the heights of heaven. You understand that completely, and all the patterns in the reality that stem from that. So understand that part of yourself and start to mentally understand what you're doing and what actions you take because of that. Okay? Just really see yourself in that, right? What you're doing, where you're at with it. Then look to your North Node and understand all of the octaves of that sign. So for me, Capricorn, understand everything about Capricorn, and I can tell you everything about Capricorn. And then understand what it would take to balance those two things. And so because I have a South Node in Cancer, means that I can shift my energy patterns by doing more Capricorn. But what do those two things represent? They represent home and career. Well, look at that. I was way into my career, so there's a giveaway. Cancer's in my 10th house. It's flipped. And I was doing way too much in my career emotionally and not a dang thing at home. So the first thing I had to do, and this is just small baby steps, y'all, I first brought the awareness, like I told you. Second is I really understood the things that I told you in step 2, like just really understand all parts of it and, accept it, and then really start to understand step 3 and go slow. Capricorn traits for me. I had to have good patterns in my home, which meant every morning I got up and repetitively did this and did that, and really, and I'm not going to kid y'all, that was super hard. It took me like 10 years to be okay in my home. But I had a lot of people that were reflecting to me the good and the bad of those Capricorn traits, right? So that I could say, oh, I see it, because everybody is mirroring something to us. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense. Go look at your chart, understand yourself in North Node, understand the planets and the archetypes that are there, and really start to implement in small little baby steps. You don't want to crash out. That's what was happening to me with Capricorn. I'm like, fine, I'm just going to work at home, divorce my husband, do all these things, and da 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 da. And no, you don't have to make it perfect all at once. Just start to slowly embody the higher octaves of your South Node, and then whatever you can implement in your life emotionally and physically, action wise, of your North Node. And if you keep doing that, you're going to get into balance of the two. And guess what? What's in it for you? You're going to feel amazing. You're not going to self-sabotage your life anymore. You're not going to be running in circles anymore, because your South Node will kind of take you that way. And you're not going to desire for things outside yourself. That's the biggest thing. You're not going to obsess about things, because the North Node keeps us obsessing for what we don't have. But when you're whole, you have everything embodied in yourself. So if you can give me an example when you kind of get your North and South Node of some of your tendencies and traits, put them in the comments, because I hope people start to read that. Just remember, content is for years. So whatever you share, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's immediately going to take effect or things. People will look at that in the future and they will learn through your example. So please share, like, subscribe, whatever you can do to support the channel. I would appreciate it. And until next time, take care.